Hi, my name is Renee Rizzo. Today, I will be introducing you to resources to teach the concept of parallel lines to high school students in alternate assessment settings. This video will be teacher facing and will guide you through a Google Slides presentation explaining the reasoning behind my planning of the lesson in this manner, a Microsoft Word document I created with which I will demonstrate a real world connection for the content, and use of the Immersive Reader Accessibility Feature, differentiated Google Forms I created for student assessment, and ideas for how to use Flipgrid to deliver instruction or to invite student participation in remote and blended learning settings. So this lesson is geometry, parallel lines in the plane. Our relevant next gen learning standards, which are the standards that are generally used in New York for students in general education, would be on the coordinate plane, explore the proof for the relationship between slopes of parallel and perpendicular lines, determine if lines are parallel, perpendicular, or neither based on their slopes, and apply properties of parallel and perpendicular lines to solve geometric problems. Our focus question for this lesson: how can we demonstrate that the slopes of parallel lines are equal? Our objective: use the slope criterion to show parallel lines. Our related NISA DLM essential element would be to know the attributes of perpendicular lines, parallel lines, and line segments, angles, and circles. Linkage levels to this DLM essential element. So our initial precursor, which would be where our students at the very entry level would access this skill, would be to recognize same, recognize different, and recognize attributes. The distal precursor, which is the next level, inching closer to the target, would be to recognize point, recognize ray, recognize angle, and recognize right angles. Our proximal precursor, which is getting even closer to the target, would be to recognize circles, recognize parallel lines and line segments, and recognize perpendicular lines and line segments. Our target would be to define circle, explain angle, explain perpendicular lines and line segments, explain parallel lines and line segments. And our successor, which goes even beyond the target, would be to explain straight angles, explain adjacent angles, and explain vertical angles. So if the objective of this lesson is not realistic for your students, you see there are many different directions you can go that can still access the essential element. Vocabulary for this lesson: parallel lines, straight lines that remain the same distance from one another and never meet. No matter how far they go, they will never touch each other. And I purposely included a visual of parallel lines, which I created in Microsoft Word very simply. And then slope, the steepness of a line or its rise over run. I always introduce vocabulary before I teach a lesson so that students are more likely to comprehend uh, the subject matter we are discussing. I might also incorporate real life examples of use of the word parallel, such as parallel parking, which is parking against the curb, or parallels between people, which means their similarities. So, for our kinesthetic learners, our learners who learn by moving their bodies, they can create parallel lines using their bodies, whether it's just their arms or their legs, or they're advanced enough where they can actually get into a yoga pose, because I know many of our students in alternate assessments do participate in yoga and movement programs. That would be excellent too. So, however, your kinesthetic learners can access the skill would be wonderful. Tactile learners can create parallel lines using common household or classroom items such as pencils, pens, toothbrushes, toothpicks, forks, spoons, whatever you can think of to get your hands on learners really involved in the content and really understanding uh, the content in a way that is accessible for them. For our visual and auditory learners, you can look at pictures of parallel lines, in this case from the teacher's home, which I will show you, but the classroom would also be appropriate. Full sentences about what is in each picture can be read aloud through the Microsoft Word Immersive Reader. Students can then share their own photos of parallel and perpendicular lines in their home or classroom, coupled with narration if the student is a verbal communicator. I'm now sharing with you the Microsoft Word document I made. And when you go under View into Immersive Reader, there's an option to read aloud.
Parallel lines in Miss Rizzo's home. The vertical, up and down, bars in this railing are parallel to each other. We know this, because no matter what, they will never cross-touch each other. The horizontal, across, bars in this railing on the top and bottom are parallel to each other. They will never cross or touch each other. However, the vertical, up and down, bars, do meet with the horizontal, across, bars, so they are not parallel to each other. The lines in this door are the same distance apart at every point. If they were to go on and on forever, they would still never meet, so they are parallel. These shelves are parallel. As you follow them across, they never get closer together. Even if you were to extend all these shelves, they would never meet. These are horizontal lines. Even if you imagine extending these blinds to fit over a tremendous window, the blinds will never cross over each other. They will remain straight and the same distance apart all the way across. They are parallel to each other.
So, in addition to this being naturally engaging because it incorporates real life images into the material, the Immersive Reader is also a great accessibility feature for our students who are not yet readers or our students who have disabilities that are barriers to them becoming readers. It's a great way for them to be able to engage with text. So now I want to show you 3 different levels of Google Forms that I created for student assessment. So our level 1 would be for students to identify parallel lines by selecting the picture. And for the second question, it's actually the same question, but the choices are reversed to see if students really understand the topic or if they're just choosing. Um, For level 2, it's identify the parallel lines by selecting, which is still the starting point. And then how do you know the lines you selected are parallel? The choices because they cross each other, because they are two-dimensional, or because they are the same distance apart at every point and will never cross each other, which is, of course, the correct answer here. And then which household items contain parallel lines, apples, balloons, or shelves. And I purposely included a picture from the lesson in the hopes that this would connect with the students and they would remember what they learned. For level 3, which would be the highest level, it would be first identify parallel lines and then open-ended questions, which encourage higher order thinking. So how do you know the lines you selected are parallel to each other, and explain? And what are some items in your home or your classroom that contain parallel lines? So keep in mind, these are just 3 examples of ways you can differentiate assessments. These may be appropriate for your classroom or they may not. You may need to just tweak some things, um, but use this as a template. And then finally, I want to show you Flipgrid.
So Flipgrid has some really great features that you can use when you're delivering lessons or when you're inviting students to respond to lessons. As you see, I typed text here, which is an option. Parallel lines are. This is a sticker that I input of parallel lines. Then I put parallel lines are not. And I could go into an explanation of why these are not parallel lines. These lines are already intersecting, so they're definitely not parallel lines because parallel lines remain the same distance apart at all points and never meet. For the same reason, these two would not be parallel lines. These two lines are not intersecting yet, but they would intersect eventually if you kept extending them, so they are also not parallel. So there's other possibilities of what you can do with Flipgrid, but those are just some of the features. Text, stickers, you can draw, you can speak. So there's a lot of possibilities for both you and your students using this as a tool.
Thank you.